Hello and welcome back for part 3 of our 3-part series on finding and applying for scholarships. My name is Erin Korsvall. I am Program Officer for Scholarships for the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. And I know you're thinking, why is the Reagan Foundation doing a series on scholarships? And that is because we happen to run several scholarship programs that are open right now for your application. And we hope you do consider applying. But we know that the scholarship application process can be a very confusing process for students and families, particularly if this is the first time someone in your family is going through that process. So we wanted to share some of the wisdom that we have learned over the years and some of our scholars have learned over the years about how to successfully navigate this process and really how to set yourself up for success in the scholarship application process. So joining me today, I have some people who know a thing or two about being successful in the scholarship application process. We have some scholars with us who have received the prestigious G.E. Reagan Foundation Scholarship, which is a $40,000 scholarship. This year's application is still available through January 5th, and we do hope you consider applying. But I'm really excited to introduce to you today 4 scholars who are going to help you share all their wisdom about how to score those coveted scholarships that will help you pay for college. So leading us through this conversation today, we have a 2019 G.E. Reagan Foundation Scholar, Jessi Figard. Jessi is a student at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, and she's studying decision science. So Jessi, thank you so much for being here. We're really excited for you to host this series, and I'll turn it over to you to introduce our panelists.
Thank you for the introduction, Erin. So first up, we have Taylor Barr. Taylor is a 2018 G.E. Reagan Scholar and also attends Creighton University, where he studies economics and management with an additional major in social entrepreneurship. He's incredibly passionate about rural health and is also an experienced wakeboarder and surfer. Welcome, Taylor. Next up, we have Brandon Fabel. Brandon is a 2014 G.E. Reagan Scholar, and he graduated from Carleton University in 2018, where he studied economics. Presently, he is a senior analyst at Wells Fargo. He is also an avid traveler and has been to over 10 different countries. Welcome, Brandon. Our last panelist today is Normandie Cormier, and she is a 2019 scholar. She attends Xavier University, and she currently studies neuroscience. She's a bit of an overachiever and is actually finishing up her degree this year. She's also interning at one of the top nation's neurosurgeons, and she is very passionate about medicine and giving back to her community. We are all very excited to talk to you today. I think one of the overwhelming questions that I had when I was applying to scholarships was just, what are some ways you can find out about the scholarship organizations and what they're really looking for?
I know that one way I did it was I used Google search to find a lot of the different scholarship organizations. And then after doing that, I made a list and I would try to find like previous scholars from the Scholarship Foundation's websites. And I'd send them like a message on LinkedIn if you have a LinkedIn. And a lot of people on LinkedIn are eager to help younger students who have won it in the past and give them some really helpful advice as they're going through the application process. And again, just looking at the scholarship websites and looking at the profiles of the previous scholars will give you some great advice on what the Scholarship Foundation is looking for, so you can tailor your application based on the experiences you've had to the best it can possibly be.
Thank you, Taylor. And Brandon, I know that scholarship programs don't necessarily have a one-size-fits-all criteria. Could you tell me a little bit more about why it's important to personalize your application to the specific scholarship?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jessi. I think that one of the big things to look at, there's lots of scholarships out there, as you've probably seen in the other parts of our series and how you can find these different things. But And you're trying to figure out, okay, on this application, what's the best way to kind of try to stand out? And where I started is I look at what are the things that I've been involved with. And one of the two pieces of advice that I'd give right away is number one, start when you're in like 9th grade, 10th grade, write up a CV, start writing down what you're in, I had a spreadsheet where I kept track of where am I volunteering, what groups am I involved with. And that's a great place to start kind of seeing, okay, what kind of interests do I have? What kind of things, how would I describe the things I'm passionate about? And then you can start kind of cross-referencing that, like Taylor said, with Google, what kind of things are out there that you can find. Even the individuals that you work with when you're either volunteering with organizations, doing different programs at your school, those leaders will know about different scholarships, and you can start looking at some of those things. And then, like Taylor mentioned, it's great to reach out to past scholars or even just going to their websites and seeing what kind of information and things do they write about these past scholars, and do they have some backgrounds that link to things that you're good at. Those things will really help you kind of figure out, okay, these are the kind of personal attributes I have, and how can I then tailor that in my application to highlight that and match it with what these different scholarship programs have out there.
Thank you so much, Brandon. And Normandie, I know that most scholarships do require a personal essay or statement. How can you use this opportunity to bring your application to life and perhaps even share a unique story about yourself?
That's a great question, Jessi. So for starters, a personal statement is the perfect opportunity to show scholarship committees who you are and why they should invest in your future besides your GPA and your test scores. I personally believe that one of the most important factors in writing a successful scholarship essay is knowing that you have a unique story to tell. I have the pleasure of working with a lot of students around the world, and I commonly hear students say that I don't have an exciting story, or that I don't know how to write my story in a compelling manner or a compelling way. And honestly, you don't need to have necessarily a compelling story. In fact, I have a few tips about how you can actually, write a good story and not have to attract the reader in a sense. So one, always consider the person or the reader when you're writing your essay. Be as simple and concise as possible. You have to be super wordy or use super gigantic words. Be honest and write true to your voice. Read the questions carefully and make sure your essay directly answers or addresses what they're asking you. And lastly, remember that actions speak louder than words. So rather than telling the reader, "Oh, I'm a hard worker who loves to give back," show them through your personal experiences. If you use these simple tips, I think you can go along with your application and really just write a great personal essay.
Thank you so much, Normandie. And on that, what were some tales that you told about yourself in your essays? Was there any story that you really like to share?
Well, Jessi, I'll start out. And I'd say one thing that I really liked and helped me with mine, right? And Normie talks about how do you show that you're hardworking and that, you think of different scholarships. Sometimes they're looking for leadership. And so I talked a lot about kind of my experience in Boy Scouts and on my journey to getting the Eagle Scout and earning that rank in my Eagle Scout project. A lot of that was able to help me take this experience I've had. And then on top of that, the nice thing is if you have some sort of experience like that, it can probably work for multiple scholarships, right? Whether it's one that's on leadership, specifically for the Boy Scouts, there's an Eagle Scout scholarship. So you can take some of that information in that one story that you might shape for one application, make sure to kind of save that information down and use it in other questions that are popping up. But I think everybody has some sort of thing they're passionate about when they're in school that they can find, and you can take that as whatever way to help fit to that question.
Yeah, and I also really thought about what made my leadership position so unique, versus there's lots of people that are presidents of different clubs. There's lots of people that are if you think of all the kids across the nation that are presidents of different clubs. I really tried to think about what was so unique about my leadership position that no one else could say, and that's really what I tried to focus on in my essay, in all of the essays that I wrote, because I felt like it really spoke to how my leadership was unique, not just as the position, but also the actions, the way I lead and the way I lead others was unique. So I think that's a really good, helpful tip to emphasize how you've led. And like Normandie said earlier, cite specific examples. Nothing speaks better than listing the actions that you've actually taken in the past, and try to quantify things.
Can you give an example of how a student might quantify these experiences? I know that quantify was not really a word I understood in high school, so I think it may be good to clarify that just a bit.
Yeah. So when I say quantify, I mean like use numbers to illustrate to the reader, the person that's looking at your application and making these decisions, the scope of your leadership. So if you increase membership in a club, let's say you've more than doubled membership in an organization, make sure to give an exact percentage. Or if you recruit an extra 50 members to come to this community service event, that drastically increases your impact, and make sure to write that down in your application as well. That's something I really found to be very helpful, because it also gives the reader a better picture of what you actually did and the impact that you had on your community.
Thank you so much, Taylor. That's a great tip. Following up with that, a lot of scholarships do require a recommendation from someone who can speak to your accomplishments. I know that for me, it was a really awkward experience to go up and ask for this recommendation. How would you find the right recommender? And like, how would you also set up with the person to make sure that they can really write something personal that speaks to your accomplishments?
First, for me personally, I always like to look at what the essays were about before I asked a recommender. And I made sure to start really, really early on this, because if you don't start early, you want to give, I'd always try to give my recommenders at least a month in advance notice before before I needed their letter, just to make sure they had ample time. And because writing a letter of recommendation takes a lot of work, and you want to make sure that they're have plenty of time to do their best. And it just also speaks to the candidate that they write about, just giving them extra time. It also, it's just very professional. And like I asked my English teacher, one, because I knew she was an excellent writer and I had a really close relationship with her. She had me for multiple years, coming from a small school, taught me for more than 1 year. She had known me since I was younger. She worked very closely with my aunt, who was the math teacher. And also, one of my essays was specifically about my leadership in FBLA. So I really tried to, FBLA is the Future Business Leaders of America, and I was the national officer in FBLA. And so I made sure to ask, one of my essays was about FBLA and how the impact it had on me and how it made me unique. And I made sure to ask that recommender as well, because she had worked really closely with me in those capacities, and she could attest and confirm all the experiences that I was listing on in those essays. She could verify them and add on from her own personal interactions with me.
Thank you, Taylor. I'd love to hear from Normandie. How did you pop the question? How did you ask them to recommend you?
So thankfully, I had great connections. Great relationships with my teachers. So it wasn't really hard for me to ask them. But I definitely made sure to ask in advance. I made sure to have an academic resume on hand when I came to them, or when I emailed them, asking, can you please write me a recommendation? I also just made sure that I gave them an ample amount of time. And like I said, I think I started asking my junior year in high school for recommendations. I don't know if that's early or if that's not early, but I started asking at that point in time, because I knew that I really want to apply for scholarships, and I really want to make sure everything was done early on. So just when you're approaching your teacher, just understand that they are writing recommendations for a lot of students. So just make sure that you have your academic resume on hand, and that understand they have lives as well, especially during this pandemic. So just kind of have compassion for them. But can you please write me one? But also understand they also have things on the side as well. So just send them a good email if you can, stating your case, and hopefully be able to write you a good recommendation.
Thank you, Normandie. So I love how Brandon and Taylor earlier mentioned how they reached out through LinkedIn to past scholarship recipients. And I was wondering, how can others assist you in the scholarship process? For example, family, counselors, and how do you ask them for help?
Absolutely. I think that's a great like support base that you try to find. And I think, jumping off of like Taylor and Normandie talking about making sure you have ample time. And the other thing, like Taylor talked about, looking at this different scholarships themselves, right? You want to see and start figuring out, okay, when I was applying, I looked at different tiers, and I said there's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 scholarships, and that can be based off of, maybe I'm good and qualified for this scholarship. Maybe it's, this one's a lot more money or has a lot more work to it. So I might put that in tier 1, knowing I'm going to spend a lot of time on it. So figuring out what those scholarships are, what the requirements are, that can then help figuring out, okay, you don't want to sit there and go to like your parents or to a counselor or to a mentor at your school and be like, hey, I've got 50 scholarship applications. Can you read over all of them? Right? Because they've got a life outside of this. They're going to have all kinds of other things to do. So trying to figure out which ones strategically, these ones are the ones I fit best with. These are the ones that I'm putting a lot of work in, and reach out to those mentors. And on top of that, the same thing works with LinkedIn. It's like, okay, I know I fit a lot of the qualifications for this scholarship. I've been able to find these people on LinkedIn. I want to strategically reach out to the ones that I can find and talk to. So that all of that kind of planning and putting that stuff ahead really help you out with that. And then of course, the earlier you can start with this and start making that plan, and whether it's making a list when you're researching scholarships or just working through and meeting all these people and talking with them over it, those things will really, really help when it comes down to then asking for help from this. And think about who in your network you can really go to, whether it's an English teacher, a school counselor, some sort of mentor, or parents that are willing to help you look through applications, or even tell you about different applications that you might not know about.
Great, Brandon. So Normandie, what were some mistakes you made when applying to different scholarships?
Well, great question also. For probably procrastinating, honestly, I'll be honest about that. Sometimes I'll wait till the very last minute to apply for a scholarship. Please don't do that. Yeah, but procrastinating till the last minute, waiting till the last minute was one mistake I made. A second mistake was not looking over my application completely, and not having someone look over my essays for me. I think at one point, I submitted an essay. It was like 12 in the morning. I was like, I'm done with this essay. I'm done with the scholarship application. I want to just send it off. But definitely make sure someone looks over your essays and your application if possible. That way you have a better chance of winning the scholarship. So.
And Taylor, sorry.
Just kind of building off of that. I also, like, before my senior year, like, I made like a timeline to kind of avoid, because like as humans we need like a certain amount of sleep and stuff. So I always tried to make sure that like I made a timeline with all the deadlines, and like just planning really, really like early. I thought was very, very helpful for me. And writing it down in dates and sticking to those dates. Or like if it's due like on the 25th of December, make sure that you have it submitted by the 24th in your planner, and like stick to that date. Like that's something I did, and I thought that it was very helpful for me, because even if it wasn't like quite perfect, I got it submitted, and then I was able to go on to the next thing. So.
Thank you so much. Normandie, I'd also love to hear from you. What are some tips you have after you complete the application? So you go through this entire process, you go through the struggles of procrastination, maybe not always putting the most effort into something because scholarship applications are so tiring. What do you do after you hit the submit button?
I definitely understand what you're saying, because I treated my scholarship application, weirdly enough, like a part-time job. So adding on to what Taylor said, organization and making sure you have all your deadlines and everything together, it's very key. It's very important. So you mentioned after completing your application. So it may be easier said than done, but don't stress about what you no longer can control. You did your best, you completed the application, and all you can pretty much do now is check to make sure you submitted the application correctly, and also that you provided a good email address for them to contact you. It's also a good idea to send a thank you note to emphasize your appreciation and to quickly respond to any emails the scholarship program sends you, especially if it's regarding additional information they may need for you or a possible interview. And most importantly, have patience. Continue to maintain your GPA and don't give up on applying for scholarships.
Thank you, Normandie. I love the never give up attitude. So we're having a question from the chat, and it appears that we should probably clarify a bit more when you say go to LinkedIn and message a past scholarship recipient. What exactly do you mean by that? And how do you approach this? Like, can you give an example maybe of what you may outline in this message to the person?
Yeah, so ideally you would be friends with them already and have them in your network. But the person I reached out to was already in my network. But if not, when you like send someone a LinkedIn request, you're allowed to send a little short message, and you can say, and you're limited in the amount of characters. Like it can't be more than a few sentences in the message you sent in your invite. On LinkedIn, like when you send them a connection request, just clarify, hey, I was wanting to connect. I was wondering if you would be able to give me a few tips on applying for XYZ scholarship, and I'd really appreciate it if you could, but if not, I completely understand. Have a great rest of your day. I sent something like that, and then like I only sent it to one person, and then like the next day he sent me a message back on LinkedIn, and he had like an hour phone call with me. And then once I made it to the finalist interview rounds, he even did like mock interviews with me, which was really cool. So I would definitely tap into your network and just be very professional in what you're doing.
Thank you. And I know
Taylor's point, I think the cold messaging can be a little bit hard sometimes too, but I had a few people where you can go and just like Taylor said, you can put a few quick sentences in there and try to just say, hey, I'm interested in this application. I've seen you've done this, would love to connect and learn more. And I think that those things, and you look at, hopefully there's all those different levels of scholarships, right? More local ones where you might know the person, or you might know somebody in the family that you can easily reach out to and you already have that in your network, or outside of your network. The way technology now, we can connect a lot easier. You can just kind of send that message and let them know, hey, I'm interested in this, that quick sentence of just why you're reaching out to them, and then be ready with kind of very concise questions and leading info, things you have about the scholarship. Doing that research will help you on the back end.
Thank you so much. And Normandie,
sorry.
No, go right ahead. Zoom call. It's always like that.
I want to quickly piggyback off of what Brandon and Taylor said. So this is the age of social media. During my time applying for scholarships, I was contacting previous scholars on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also LinkedIn. But I think Facebook and Instagram were probably the two apps I use the most. But I think most scholars understand that we're all on the search to find to graduate and go to college, or go to college and graduate debt free. So they understand where you're coming from. Just be honest with them. Ask them questions, like Brandon said, specific questions, and just be ready in case they have any questions for you. But mostly they understand where you're coming from. You want to win scholarships, and basically just ask them questions that you think that will help you with winning the scholarship, basically. But so just use as many resources as you definitely can if you're hungry for scholarships, use all the resources you can.
Thank you so much. I know it can be a daunting task to reach out to possibly a stranger, even someone in your network. So as, I guess, past and present scholars, can you tell me, has anyone ever reached out to you? And as the person who is being reached out to, like, how do you feel? Do you reply to everyone? Maybe you could give a little bit of advice of what you've seen people do really well in these messages.
Yeah, so I've actually had two people reach out to me, that complete strangers on LinkedIn actually, and they did exactly what I did. So I was very understanding of what they were trying to do. I really understood their perspective, like Normandie said, and I was wanting to help them because I had someone help me, and I was giving them very genuine advice. And I feel like most people that are applying for these sorts of awards also are in that same position. Like Normandie said, they don't want to graduate with a bunch of debt, and they also want to make a difference in the world generally. So that they're usually more than eager to help. So I would encourage you to reach out to someone if you think that they could be of great use. And the worst you can get's no, or I don't have time, or even a no response. It's not like it's going to have any actual damage on your life.
Yes, and there are always many other scholars to reach out to. So if one doesn't answer, then just keep going. But thank you for reassuring everyone that they probably will want to help you. That can honestly be a really scary thing to go off and put yourself out there. Do you guys have any final tips that you'd like to share with our audience?
I think the final thing that I always highlight of two things is first, number one, this is just something that I was told going through the process, but and this is just easier now and might be old dated advice, but email address or like email that you have, set up some sort of professional email that you kind of set up for whether it's college applications, scholarships, all these different things. It's great to have that then compared to whatever email you might have created 10 years ago with your friends, something that's separate from that. And then the other thing is that all of this work and the time that you put into it, it's surprising how all of this actually kind of comes back and forward. So now that I'm kind of in the workforce, I joke, a lot of the things I did for scholarships, when you get to college and you start looking towards graduation, you apply for jobs and it all comes back around. Networking with people, reaching out, having kind of that schedule of making sure you're researching what firms you're applying to, all of these things will help you in the future. So it might seem like a lot when you're in high school. You're like, oh, I've got all of my work. I've got to apply to schools. I've got all the scholarship stuff. But the work really does help in the future, and it'll be time well spent.
Thank you, Brandon. That's great advice. I'm glad to hear that it came back around to help you in the future. Normandie, do you have any final tips?
Yes, I do. So, and this is based on my personal experience winning scholarships, but I think every student is more than capable of going to college debt free. And that's my personal opinion. It's going to take hard work. It takes determination. It takes perseverance, and you have to be hungry. You have to really want it. But at the end of the day, it's all worth it when you can say, I'm going to college debt free, loan free. It's really worth it at the end. So if you want it, it's out there for you to get. As it was mentioned in the last series, it's $1 billion pie. Okay, so there's a lot for everyone.
Thank you so much. And Taylor, would you like to share any last words of wisdom?
Yeah, so I guess I would also say like scholarships don't end in high school. Like I would also encourage you to continue applying as you go throughout college. I have applied for a few in college, and it just adds to what you have. And if you want to go to grad school later on, it can help you with grad school and those sorts of things as well. So I would just encourage you to always keep a positive attitude and kind of enjoy the process as well, because it's a lot of work, like they said, and you tend to do, when you want to do something, the results tend to come out a lot better than if you're not wanting to do it. So
Thank you. And I have one last question for everyone. Did you ever have a sense of perhaps imposter syndrome? Did you ever feel really nervous about applying to a scholarship, or even when you got a scholarship, you maybe felt like, oh goodness, maybe I didn't deserve this, maybe this is a mistake? Like what really pushed you to apply for these scholarships? And like, did you ever think maybe I shouldn't apply to this?
I think I'll start and I'll pass it then over to Normandie and Taylor. But, for me, I think one of the hardest parts was actually thinking about like writing about yourself, right? It was just one of these things where you're kind of like, oh, I do leadership, I do this and this and this. And it was hard at first to start kind of going through all of that and thinking about it. And then, but once you kind of get down to it, and this is where I think too, leaning on whether it's mentors, whether it's, your parents who can help you kind of like go through things, or for me, that's where the CV really helped me. I could look through and say, oh, I have done these different things. Because when you first sit down thinking about what you want to put on paper is really hard to do. But yeah, it's definitely something that gets there. And I think you just got to tell yourself, listen, There's a lot of people who are out there who are applying for all these different things. You kind of let it fall where it falls, and just the first step is that action, putting yourself out there, seeing where it goes.
I think that looking at it like as a job, I really saw it as a job. So like I said, I had a timeline. Like I would have this scholarship done by this date and this scholarship done by this date. And like in a job, if you don't do something, you get fired. So that was kind of the mindset I had when I was applying for this. I'm like, I have to get this done. And if I'm working for someone, I also want to make sure it's high quality work. So I just kind of looked at it as a job. And I thought that that was something that really helped me to overcome imposter syndrome, because even in a job in the workforce, you're going to turn in things, and the boss might not, your boss might not always like it, but you still turn it in if you want to keep the job. So that's kind of how I looked at it. And I felt like that really helped me to ensure I was turning in and delivering what I was intending to do.
Right. And also, one thing I did struggle with was not selling myself short. I knew that I was a part of student council. I was in National Honor Society. I was in Beta. I was in all these different things. I was just managing my own non-for-profit. So I was like, okay, I'm doing quite a few things. But is my story really unique? Like, do I really want, or should I really deserve to get this scholarship? And bottom line is, you definitely do. Everyone deserves to, like I said, everyone who wants to go to college and wants to get money for school deserves to. So don't sell yourself short. Tell your story, be confident in it. And, if, there are millions of scholarships out there. If one scholarship committee says no, another one will. So like I said before, do not give up. Don't sell yourself short, and always go for it.
Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it back over to Erin, but yeah, never sell yourself short. Always remind yourself that you're going to be a lot happier in the end, and remind yourself of your accomplishments like Normandie did. I mean, remind yourself that you're a unique person. Everyone's unique. Everyone's special in some way. And with that, I'll hand it over to Erin. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jessi, for taking us through that conversation. And there was so much great information shared here. I actually want to ask one final question, because we could keep this conversation going for a while, but something came to my mind. We are in this remote world where a lot of scholarship programs, particularly this year, although our program has been doing this since the beginning, but a lot of programs are going to be doing virtual interviews this year. So I'm wondering if you can comment about, I know you had to do an interview for the GE Reagan Foundation Scholarship Program. So each of you, Jessi included, I would love to hear just how do you go about setting yourself up and telling your story and presenting yourself well in an interview, particularly in a virtual interview, which a lot of applicants are going to need to do this year. Normandie, why don't you kick us off?
So how to prepare for a virtual interview. I will admit, when it was time for my virtual interview with for the GE Reagan Foundation, I was very anxious. But I think one thing that really helped me was definitely practicing with someone I really trusted, making sure I knew myself. Sometimes it's hard for us to be like, what have I really done throughout high school? Kind of just telling yourself, do I really deserve this? And once you can decide that, yes, I do deserve this, that's when like the serious kind of comes and you're like, okay, well, I can definitely tell this person who's going to interview me, why they should invest in my future, why I have been a great leader in high school, why I've been giving back. And that really helps to kind of help you do great in your interview. So definitely practice, definitely make sure you have your information down path of what extracurriculars you've been a part of and leadership programs and whatnot, and just do your best.
I definitely echo everything Normandie just said. Personally, one thing that I do is I search up common interviewing questions beforehand. I practice, and I use a thing called the STAR method. I actually just sent a link in the chat, so please check it out. But it's kind of like applying to a job in a way. There are certain questions you can kind of assume you're going to be asked, like, tell me about yourself. So just honestly, practice makes perfect. And one other thing, when you're doing a virtual interview, it can feel very awkward because you can see your own face. And I don't know why, but to me, like that just freaks me out. So what I suggest doing is practice looking at yourself, like when you're talking, because you're going to be doing that in a virtual interview. Normally, when you're talking to someone, you can't see yourself talking. So it can make it just a little bit more like daunting. So practice that.
That's great advice. Great advice. How about you, Taylor?
I always tried to like practice with the actual environment that I was going to be in. So I would get on, if I knew I was going to do an interview in the high school was letting me borrow an office, I would go in there and of course ask permission beforehand and just practice it under real conditions, real interview conditions. And then I also asked some people that didn't know, like I knew, like they were acquaintances, but I wasn't very close with them. And I asked that because that was how I wanted someone to come ask me questions that wasn't very close with me. So I would feel like it was more like the actual conditions of the interview. And I even had them like set up a like a FaceTime. We did it on iPhones, and so it was digital again. I just tried to simulate the real conditions as much as I possibly could.
Great. Brandon, you want to close us out?
Yeah, I'd echo again, like practicing, and right now, like you can practice this kind of virtual with other people. I was lucky with number one, I had a teacher that I went and was like, I knew, but they wanted to help me do a mock interview. And doing that mock interview is great. Even if you pretend it's like, hey, I want you to pretend you're interviewing me for this job or something, it's really great. And the other big part is an elevator speech. And you hear it all the time. It's going to happen for the rest of your life. You're going to need some sort of elevator speech, that 30-second to a minute. Tell me about yourself. Practice that, do different things, write it up, whatever makes it so that you can be comfortable, so that when you get that first question of tell me about yourself, you've got it in your mind, you know what you're going to say right away.
That's great. Well, you all did a very good job in your interviews because you have received the G.E. Reagan Foundation Scholarship, and we hope that there are some future G.E. Reagan Foundation scholars out there listening to this. So thank you all, Jessi, Brandon, Normandie, Taylor. I really appreciate your time today. Everyone, thank you so much